Well, welcome to the very last night of the Easter home groups. And before we get into the content tonight, just to say a word of thanks, we have 9 host homes and about 125 people who've been participating in the groups. And I just want to thank the host homes. It's a lot of work to open your house and to get your house ready and to spread some food out. And so thank you very much for being a part of this and hosting our groups. And also thanks to the curriculum team. I had a group of people who helped me study Philippians 3 and producing the content. And also behind the camera, thanks to Dominique Anderson, she's been filming all these videos and editing them, and so we appreciate her doing that. You know, all of this started with a study of this phrase in Philippians 3 where Paul says, I want to know the power of the resurrection. And we've been digging away at Philippians 3 and seeing that that statement's in the context of what it means to know Christ, have a direct personal relationship with Christ, and understanding the surpassing worth of knowing Him. We've looked at what it means to count it rubbish, that we can't pursue the treasures of this world and pursue Christ at the same time. They're at opposite ends of the spectrum. And then last week, that really deep topic about sharing in the sufferings of Christ and why that's just a part of what it means to be a follower of Christ, and more importantly, how we rejoice in that. Well, this morning, we really got into a very difficult phrase that Paul says in verse 11. He talks about how that he wants to know Christ and the power of the resurrection, may share in His sufferings, becoming like Him in His death, that by any means possible I may attain the resurrection from the dead. Or as the King James translates it, if by any means I might attain the resurrection of the dead. And we talked this morning about the difficulty of how Paul uses conditional language as he's talking about the resurrection, and how that informs how we read the rest of chapter 3. And just to summarize this morning, I made 4 observations as we dealt with that. And the first was that in the New Testament, the assurance of our salvation is not based on something in the past, but the assurance of our salvation is based upon the present reality of our faith walk. So the Apostle John says in 1 John, these things I have written to you that you may know you have eternal life. Well, how do you know? He says, well, you know because you obey His commands and they're not a burden to you. You know because you love the Lord. You know because you love your neighbor. You know because the testimony of the Spirit within your spirit, they're present-day realities, and that's the basis of our assurance. The second thing we talked about this morning was the idea of apostasy, that apostasy is a real possibility. 1 Timothy 4, Paul said that the Spirit clearly says that in latter times many will apostatize. They will abandon the faith. And these will be people that from the outside looking in, you look at them and think they look like they're among the Christian community, and they may even see themselves among the Christian community. But the fact that they leave and abandon it demonstrates that they were never really among the redeemed and the reborn when they apostatize. And in light of that, Paul makes a statement here, and he says, because of that, I want to press on to the upward call. And so that we can guarantee that our assurance is in the present tense and that we're not among those who apostatize. And I'm going to press on to the upward call of knowing Christ. And then the fourth thing we looked at this morning is that we press on not to gain our salvation. We press on because of our salvation. So Paul said, I press on because Christ has already taken a hold of me. Or earlier in chapter 2 of Philippians, he said, work out your salvation, for it is God who is at work in you. Peter said that to make every effort to add in your faith and make your calling and election sure. Why do we make it sure? Because we've been called and we've been chosen by God. And so we don't work to gain our salvation, we work because we are saved. And that's definitely a lot for you to talk about tonight in your small group. Your group leaders have some scriptures for you to read, because really it doesn't matter what I think or what I say. What matters is what the scriptures say. And so I hope tonight you'll read the scriptures about assurance and about apostasy and about what it means to press on for the upward call and how we do that out of the confidence and the assurance of our faith. I just want to leave you tonight with the story of Dan Barker. Dan Barker was evangelical minister for 19 years. He was on staff at local churches. He served as a missionary. He was a traveling speaker in the evangelical community. And then in 1984, he abandoned all that. He came out publicly and said that he had become an atheist. He wrote a book called Losing Faith in Faith, from preacher to atheist. He made the talk show circuits and all the couches of Oprah Winfrey and Phil Donahue and all those folks, talking about how he had left faith behind. In 2011, he formed the Clergy Project, which was an online social network for what he called a confidential online community for active and former clergy who do not hold supernatural beliefs. You heard that right. It is an online community for those who are in the clergy who no longer believe in the existence of God. When he started a year ago, there are 52 members. Now that's over 130. Dan Barker also is part of an organization called Freedom from Religion to educate the public on matters relating to non-theism. See, Dan Barker apostatized. For 19 years, the evangelical community looked at Dan and thought that he was one of them. He probably saw himself as one of them, but he abandoned all that and left. He stopped pressing on to the upward call, and he turned away from his faith. Now he's an atheist. See, what Paul was writing about in Philippians 3 is not extra credit Christianity. I press on for the really good things. What Paul is saying is I press on so that I may attain the resurrection of the dead. I press on because the assurance of my faith is in present tense. I press on to make sure I'm not of those who shrink back and fall away, but I press on to make sure that I will lay hold of that for which Christ has laid hold of me. I'm sure tonight you'll have a rousing conversation discussing all this and what it means to be assured of our salvation and what it means to press on to the upward call. And may the Lord guide your conversation tonight and guide you into truth and to guide you into His peace.